Hello, everyone. It is week 3. Welcome and congratulations. We are cruising right along. Ha. Now, this week we're actually going to talk about lesson planning and lessons. And because that's one of the main focuses of this class, not just English pronunciation, but also lessons. So I want to take this week to talk about just that, about what the whole point of a lesson plan is. And we're going to walk through some of the different phases of lesson planning, of making a lesson plan. So, first, we're going to explain the needs of it, why we do it, and it is very important. And then different phases of a lesson, and then there's some different ways of thinking about it. Some people like to think of a lesson plan as 4 steps or 4 phases. Some people like to, there's something called the 7 E's, and that's another way of thinking about it. So we're going to talk about the importance, walk through it a bit, and then later on, we'll walk through a lesson plan together. We'll make a short one up. This past week, I instead of discussion, we had a quiz, a short 3-question multiple choice quiz. It's mostly just a comprehension check because we're not there together. I can't see what's working and what's not working. So it's very interesting to see the feedback, as it were. Now, lesson plans are important. They are documentation. That documentation is there to protect you in case you need it, and you might need it. Now, a long time ago, over 12 years ago, back when you were in, you're like 5 or 6 or something. And anyways, yeah, this is back in 2009, 2010. I had complaints about me from students. Well, students' mothers, and students' mothers are very dangerous. And they had complaints about my lessons and about how racist they were, how much I hated Korea. And the vice principal was able to defend me because he saw my lesson plans. He saw, like, oh, that's not what he was talking about at all. The students didn't like me because there are 4 girls. I had them stop talking and I moved them to different corners. That can happen. And then they were upset and they complained to their moms, and their moms all called the school and complained. It can happen. It can happen to you, and it's important that you have documentation, the proof, to protect yourself. Lesson plans are there to protect you. Also, a very important thing about a lesson plan, it needs to be clear enough, not just so that you understand it, because it's your lesson. You know what to do. But if somebody needs to come in and substitute and fill in for your lesson, can they do it? Is there enough there for them to understand, for another teacher to teach your lesson? If, heaven forbid, you got hit by a car and had to be in hospital for a little while, could other people teach your lessons? That would be a good measure of how good and understandable your lesson plan is. But enough of this introduction. Let's get into the main lecture. So let's get down to it and talk about lesson plans. I think, lesson plans, they're really unsung heroes of teaching. They're not fun to make for most people. They're documentation, but a lot of the work that a teacher does is just that, documentation. And lesson plans provide us with the framework of what we're trying to do and direction of what we're trying to do, and also provides the documentation, the evidence of what we have been doing. And that's quite important as well. So when we talk about lesson plans, there are different parts of the lesson plan. And so we'll need to know about who the lesson is for, the student profile. Obviously, you're teaching first graders, elementary school first graders, who have a very different kind of English class or math class than you do teaching 6th graders. It's just different. They know different things. They have a lot more prior knowledge of what is going on. Also, you'll need a list of the necessary materials. What do you need to do the lesson? Sometimes all you need is a whiteboard and markers, or a blackboard and marker and chalk. Or you might need a projector, a computer screen, computer, things like that. You might need construction paper, colored pencils, crayons, scissors, glue. So if depending on the lesson, you'll need different materials. So making a list of what you need is very helpful for you to check off and make sure you have everything. One of my old jobs, I worked on a mobile classroom, as in we would travel around on a bus and teach English classes at very small elementary schools around Kangwon province. So we had, the set lessons, but we had the lesson plans. So this was important to show the schools about what we needed, what the setup we needed, so they could be better prepared for us. So we didn't, have any miscommunications, misunderstandings on where we were, where we would teach, things like that. It's quite very helpful. Also, another very important part of a lesson is the learning objective. What will the students be able to do at the end of the class? Will they be able to recognize and speak what they like or don't like about food or hobbies or colors or pronunciation phonemes? Will they be able to listen and understand and produce the phoneme of R, for example? Now, I'm going to introduce different kinds of lessons, different kind of philosophies to lessons. But the very basic part, there are 4 main phases to a lesson: introduction, development, consolidation, conclusion. That's the 4 big parts. Now we have subgroups, but those are the main groups, we call them. They have different names, but they do the same thing. Some people like the hook, book, took. Hook, book. I can't think. Hook, look, book, took. Those are the same things: introduction, development, consolidation, conclusion. If you prefer certain vocabulary, that's fine, but they do the same thing. Now, the introduction phase, this stage provides interest and motivation to the students before starting the actual class. This focuses on greeting, the warm-up, the lead-in, review from previous lessons, if you need to rearrange things, and presentation of objectives. So regardless of the amount of time we have available for any lesson, usually 40 minutes because of elementary school, but we have winter camp, we might have 2-hour lessons, things like that. Introduction should be 5 to 10 minutes. It should be short. You're going to set a purpose. You're going to introduce the topic and assess prior knowledge. What do the kids know, don't know? Introduce new vocabulary. Not teach it, introduce it. Review the previous topic, and we need to know the student's interest. It's helpful to gain. The next stage, development. This is we say student-centered. We present the material, subject matter in a coherent way, and provide students opportunities to participate and practice. So we're providing controlled practice for the target language, and we're working with cooperation and integration, so controlled group work. This is to give students fluency practice with development. Next, we have consolidation, the independent practice. It gives students opportunities to use the new language and new skills and focuses on field application. So they had controlled practice. Now this is free practice. The training wheels are off their bike, so to speak. These are less structured, less guided activities where they are creating their own language, creating their own sentences, for example, creating their own phrases. And this provides us, the teacher, the opportunity to edit and correct mistakes. And then the final phase, conclusion. This includes the summary, evaluation objectives, and closing. So to summarize what we learned, students should be able to demonstrate that they reached the objectives, and the closure is the chance to give students feedback on the performance. So to summarize and check understanding, to clarify any doubt, if we see consistent misunderstandings during the consolidation phase, we can clarify that as a group during the conclusion phase, and to reinforce what is taught in class. Good. Now, in the class materials section on eClass, you'll find a few blank lesson plan templates. One of the blanks is the lesson plan template that I used at my previous job at Samuk Elementary School. So it's the real lesson plan template. However, there's another template that I've found to be very helpful for students to learn and think about, and it's based on a different principle. So instead of the 4 stages framework, it's something called the 7 E's framework. I'd like us to talk about these 7 E's. And I think for this class, when we make lesson plans, I think using the 7 E's will be more helpful for us to build our understanding of lesson plans and how they can help us and really help us shape and form our lessons and what we expect to happen. So the 7 E's. 7 E's stand for elicit, engage, explore, explain, elaborate, extend, evaluate. There we go. Hot diggity daffodil. 7 E's. Now, that's 7 steps versus the 4 stages. These 7 steps, these 7 E's, they all fit within the 4 stages. So really, you're doing the same thing, but I think this is a nice way to understand it. All right. So the first, elicit. So we're going to elicit. So the first E, elicit. We're going to find out what students know, prior knowledge. If you're going to teach colors to them, and every one of them knows red and blue, that's helpful. That's helpful. Maybe you can start getting into different shades of red. Dark red, light red, cherry red, blood red, things like that. That's helpful. So we need to find out what students know. This can be done in different ways. Multiple choice questions, comprehension check questions, quizzes, quick quizzes, just seeing what they know, don't know, post-it notes. This is a good opportunity to find out also if the students have misconceptions about what's going on, if they have a misunderstanding, or if they've learned something incorrectly. This does happen sometimes, especially with language learners. They learn something a certain way because some jerk-ass foreign teacher taught them the wrong way. That does happen. And then we have fossilization, which is a real issue we can have. Not with young learners as much, but as they get older. So also, during the elicit phase, this is a good time to do some review because we're scaffolding on. So we start from the bottom, the foundation, then we build up and up and up. So if there's something that the students need to know to better understand or to understand the new lesson, it's a good opportunity to review that previous lesson material. The next step, so we have elicit. Next, the second E is engage. We want to engage their interest, raise their curiosity. And we're going to introduce the new learning through teacher explanation modeling and following we're going to basically make them interested. So when we talk about, well, it depends on how we say. If we're teaching sports and verbs and action verbs, this is where the fun videos come in, or the fun actions, or the pantomimes, or things like that. That's where that comes in. So we have elicit, engage. The third E is explore. During the explore stage, students will be given opportunities to work together following the initial teacher input to solve problems, to work together. This is during the consolidation stage. You've given them, you set up a task, and they try to work it out together in a controlled environment. The next stage is explain. Now, in this course, it goes explore, explain. But we can explain, explore as well. We can do a little bit of lecture explaining what's going on, especially with language. Uh, but in other lessons, say science, for example, you might do explore a bit, let the students discover a bit by themselves, and then you can clarify what's going on. You can clarify how we're going to make kimbap. They can try, they can, well, for example, if you're going to make kimbap, what are the steps to make kimbap? What do you do first, second, third, fourth, fifth? They have a general idea. They know they need dried seaweed. They know they need rice, things like that. And then you can, as they make a list, we clarify and explain. But in other classes, you'll need to explain first, and then students will go into the controlled environments, the controlled exercises. So during the explain, we're going to use what the students discovered and help them build the knowledge further. So we're going to make sure they know what's going on, and clarify and develop the concept. And then next E is elaborate. Elaborate. In this stage, students can work independently to demonstrate what they've learned, to demonstrate that they individually know what's going on. This is independent. So, as a group, one student is able to help others, but individually, you could only help yourself. So, this is the elaborate section. Now, extend is when we try to take the ideas and concepts of the individual lesson and extend it out and make connections to other lessons, to other subjects. For language, for English language or Korean language, this is great. Take what you learned with action verbs and extend it out beyond sports and things you're doing to things that we do in everyday life. And we can try to add tenses in there, future tense, past tense, all of those wonderful things. Finally, the final E is evaluate, evaluation. Now, this is where you, the teacher, will also need to evaluate how successful your lesson was. How well did it go? How did it not go well? Did the students learn what they're actually learning? This might be simple quizzes to make sure, did they actually do the things they're supposed to do? You can evaluate also your teaching. Did the activities go well? If they did not go well, why didn't they go well? Was it a material issue? Was it not a lack of understanding issue? Was it too difficult for them? Things like that. That can happen. You might prepare a lesson, and a great whiz-bang lesson at that, and with a fun activity. But if the kids don't understand, it's gonna be bad. So that is a factor, a real factor with that. So just to review the 7 E's. Just to review the 7 E's. We have elicit. We're going to see what they know. We're going to see what they know or don't know in lots of different ways. We can do this with the show me boards, playing a bingo game, multiple choice. See how much they know, prior knowledge, and what they know, what they don't know. Next, engage, build interest. We demonstrate, provide the big question, and we start teaching them the material, engaging their interest. Next, explore, practical activities, problem solving, research activities, working together in groups. Next, here we have explain, which can be reversed with explore, depending on the situation. The teacher's going to provide more lecture material, more explanation, but this is quite helpful. If you have older students, use the student's previous experience as a base to explain the concept. Try to use what they've done to teach. And if you can, get the students to explain concepts and definitions in their own words. It could be simple words, but it is helpful. Next, elaborate and extend. This is the independent task, the more the students show what they know and what they don't know. That's helpful. So they demonstrate what they've learned. and then extend it out, connect it with other subjects they've learned, other with previous lessons, so they can synthesize and incorporate their new language. Then evaluate what went well, what didn't go well. So you'll need to evaluate what the students learned or didn't learn, and you will need to evaluate the lesson yourself. What did they learn? What they didn't learn, or what went well or what didn't go well. As a side note, the discussion questions I've asked you on eClass, the short quiz last week, that was a form of evaluation. Are you, the students of EP1, are you actually learning anything? And I can see general trends of where there's some more misunderstanding and where there's less misunderstanding. That's very helpful. So those weekly discussion questions, those weekly quizzes, they're a way for me to evaluate what's actually working with these lessons and what's not. Because we're not together, I can't see it more immediately. Let's take a look at an example lesson plan. This is using the 7 E's of planning format, which I think is how we're going to start using lesson plans at the very least. It helps guide our writing. As you can see, the topic is English pronunciation. Period. It's just, the Gyoshi, it doesn't really matter. I put 5. It's for 5th grade and today's date. Now, we see the big picture of what does this help? This is English pronunciation, and more focusing on students will learn how to pronounce the F and P sound. And in more detail, they'll be able to listen and speak F and P, but also understand how to make the sounds. They'll have a larger understanding of the details. So we elicit, we see down here, elicit. Students are shown pictures of items that start with F or P sounds, such as fly, a pine tree, a phone, etc. And students are asked to call out what the pictures show. This introduction period is only 3 minutes long. You'll notice that each segment, each E, has their own time limit. So we have the short elicitation. This is a way of confirming also how much the students can pronounce and how well they pronounce these sounds. Then engage, it's only 2 minutes. Teacher displays the F sound in a long comical manner, and teacher asks students to mimic it. Some students will have some troubles. So in exaggerated tone, the teacher displays the F sound. So explore, which we said is the kind of group work. Students are elicited words that start with P and F in groups, and so they need to write a list of words, and students are provided with a diagram of the human mouth and the places of articulation diagram, which we have in our own work. And in groups, they'll try to draw how do we make these sounds versus the F and P. And we'll talk about this more in this class. Place of articulation, it does help. And so we'll talk about this. Students try to figure it out by themselves. And then summary of the differences are given by 1 or 2 groups. Then, yes, we see teacher explains the importance of teeth and lip placement, the pronunciation of these 2 sounds. Just explaining, yes, how important it is if our top teeth don't actually touch our bottom lip, we cannot make the F sound. And then for elaborate, we go on to students individually read short tongue twisters to practice the different sounds. So they're going to do an individual practice. There'll be several different tongue twisters to help practice and focus on these 2 sounds. And so different students take turns reading different tongue twisters. The audience, the other students, raise their hands to indicate which sound they hear. So this would be, for example, if you hear an F sound, you raise your right hand. If you hear the P sound, raise your left hand. So everyone's listening and following along and raising their hands one way or the other. And then extend. When you bring it out, extending, connecting with other lessons. Students are asked to bring in the B sound because the difference between the B and P are very fine. And so, fine as in small. And so we'll work, and then we bring in the B sound and practice of that to extend it, to connect it, to show that there's more differences. Evaluate. Students are again shown pictures of different vocabulary words. Individuals, students identify with the correct sounds. Teacher models a few incorrectly to have students correct the mistake. That happens. For example, instead of pine, saying fine, things like that. Students are then asked the big question, what did we learn about today? What did we learn today? And then key questions, who can explain the difference between P, P, and F? There we go. This is a basic lesson plan, nothing too fancy. You'll notice the running time is 40 minutes. Key resources, which I forgot to mention at the beginning, pictures of B, P, and F vocab, diagrams of human mouth, as in for pronunciation purposes, and tongue twisters. That is the essential equipment we need for this lesson. So throughout this class, this whole semester, you're going to be making lesson plans. And so this is an example of one such lesson. And it focuses on pronunciation, which is helpful for us because that's what we are focusing on this semester. All right, everyone, that is week 3. Just talking about lesson plans and what they're good for, and seeing how it's something that we're going to be talking about for the rest of the semester. It is quite important. Next week we'll get back into pronunciation work, but lesson planning and lesson plans in general are a very important part of teaching. So we really need to take the time to fully go into it. I'd like us to make sure to check on eClass for the blank lesson plan templates that we're going to be using this semester for our own micro lessons, and then also there'll be a brief discussion question just to make sure that we're all following along. Hopefully we're all staying safe, we're getting vaccinated, or with our first doses and second doses and what have you. Have an excellent week, and we'll see each other again next time. Thank you and goodbye.